everyone. I am here today with two of our industry's most experienced and likely most well-known operational leaders. They are also among the most humble, which is why I think they're great people for us to learn from. So today we are not just having another conversation around how to run your storage business or the strategy and the tech behind it, really looking at the people behind it and how these leaders are shaping resilient teams and embracing change and building a culture of excellence in their self-storage businesses. So we're going to dive into all of that and more and learn from Norm Shore and Pedro, Florida, two leaders with over 2 decades of self-storage experience, from on the ground all the way up to leading some of the largest portfolios in our space. So excited to dig in today and learn more together. In every conversation, your leadership and how you work to bring your teams along with you in every effort that you're doing has always really shown through. And I know your leaders, not just in your organizations, but also in this industry. So I'm so appreciative, and I've always admired that about both of you.
Here we go. Action. Norm Shore, VP of Operations for the William Warren Group, StoreQuest Self-Storage. I've been in the industry 29 years, got into self-storage in the mid-90s and basically entered it through a good personal friend of mine who was in the industry for about 35 years.
That is amazing. An amazing tenure, sir.
Thank you.
A true storage guy. Sorry, I thought you were leaving a
It was like a dramatic pause.
Yeah. I was like, okay. 1 Hail Mary, 2 Hail Marys, 3 Hail Marys. I'm like, okay, Norm's done.
And finished.
I'm a junior to Norm, Pedro, Florida, with Trojan Storage, collectively Cobre Companies. And I've been in the industry now 22 years. Also started helping a friend doing some audits, and then, kind of fell fascinated about the industry, and, time flies. So here we go. It's been a good run.
22, 29. Again, super impressed. So I know even in the 7 years that I've been in self-storage, I've seen a ton of change, I think, between COVID, consolidation, new technology. But with 22 and 29 years, respectively, I'm really curious kind of what changes you've seen and how you've led your teams through that change.
I heard this quote the other day from a retired football coach who said that, are there any dinosaurs in the room? And it was like, no. It's like, well, that's because they didn't learn to adapt. And I think that one of the things that Pedro, myself, and many people who've been in the industry for more than a minute have learned to adapt. And while it's still 3 walls and a door and a customer sort of need-based industry, I think if you're not able to adapt to the technology and to the ability to lead and provide the things for your internal customer, which are your property managers and DMs and the people you work with, as much as the external customers, then I think you'll have a problem succeeding in self-storage or any industry.
Fair.
Absolutely. I agree. I think, Kim, when you talked about you've already seen change in the 7 years that you've been in the industry, and certainly it feels in some ways like a different industry from when I started. However, like a lot of things, it feels like we're also kind of going in cycles, and at least in some ways of operating, uh, the old gets recycled, right? And we were talking with Norm the other day about when you talk about adaptability and being able to pivot, it's not just with external things, right? We were talking about, well, if you can't play small ball at some point, referring to the recent World Series, you may not win it. And I think that when it comes to change specifically, I don't think people resist change as much as they resist uncertainty, right? Like, what is that going to bring? And I think somebody like Norm, somebody like me, really what we're trying to do is reduce the uncertainty, right? Through the messaging, through the training, through explaining the why, and then really making people feel like they're a part of it. And so when you reduce the uncertainty, really the change of, hey, we used to go to the bank and you had to go into the teller, and then suddenly we had ATM cards, and then suddenly we had check scanners, and eventually everything is going to be online, or it is right eminently right now. And so going through each one of those really is explaining the benefits, the why, and bringing people along. So if you have the time and the care, right, it's that's something that you can't teach. It's something that's in you. I think you can lead through any change.
I love that you went into, the process behind bringing your team along with the change and making sure that they understand the why. Because I think we all know, yes, to your point, change can be scary. What is your approach to really helping your teams understand that why when change is coming, whether that's at an industry level or at a process level or whatever it may be?
So I think Pedro hit the nail on the head. I think they have to understand the why. And, I always jokingly say it's my favorite letter of the alphabet. 25th is why. And why are we doing it? And I think if they don't understand the why, they're not going to have the buy-in. So, whether it's, property visits, district manager training, win the day calls, um, managers meetings, you need to explain the reason why you're doing something. You need to understand what the process is, and more often than not, the solutions are typically and sometimes more often from what the manager has shared with the district manager or myself or Pedro during property visits, calls, meetings, monthly meetings, and then taking that knowledge that you have and getting it out to everyone, and then following up and ensuring that the standards are followed, because most people don't want to do the wrong things, and if we're not going to train them how to do the right things, then they will do the wrong things. And it's not about a lot of our focus is on performance based outcome. It's not outcome based training. It's performance based training and process. And if you understand the process and are focusing on what you're doing today, playing your position and doing the job that's in front of you and not worrying about the outcome is going to happen no matter what. How you're performing every day on specific job duties and responsibilities, renting space, collecting the rent, offering insurance, all this, having a clean, well-lit property. Those are all the things that are really simple, but they're not simple if you haven't trained your staff to go after those things and learn how to do things correctly.
Absolutely. I think Norm covered it all. What I would say is maybe a little tactical, recommendation is being able to see through the lens of why and explaining specifics, right? So are we saving time? are you going to have less stress? Are you going to drive less? Are there going to be less mistakes?
Mhm.
Right? Are you going to end up being happier because this is happening? Right? And as sometimes life doesn't allow us to do things with the quality that we would want. In an ideal world where you're sitting down and you're coaching someone through this, if you can tie it to an emotional bit, whatever that is for them, right? Making them feel like that's going to be what's going to cause this ripple effect of success and progress and growth, then I feel like people get more invested, and it doesn't matter what you have in front of you, right? So, but it takes time, and you have to make time when you're super busy and you have all these meetings and the world going on, and it feels like it's hard. And so it's a
Yeah.
matter of, are you making time in that moment of inception to do it right, so that then, like Norm said, then the process, it will happen itself if you did it right in the beginning.
Mhm.
Yeah, Pedro, you're 100% correct. I mean, I always ask, I like to ask three questions at every property that I visit. And the first one is, how long have you been at StoreQuest for? And that just is sort of a baseline of, I already know your name, you have a name tag on, but how long have you worked at StoreQuest for? And the second question is, what did you do before this? Because to your point about connecting the training piece is like understanding who the person that you're working with at your property or their property, and understanding what they did before is going to help you kind of create that relationship, because you're going to have some starting baseline of what they did. And then the third one is who trained you, because you want to see the consistency, as you go through a district, like if you're seeing, and more often than not, you're seeing things that are done correctly because the trainer instilled the things that we just talked about, the why. Because if your trainer's not bought into the why, then then the new people aren't going to be executing the job that you want done, because they didn't understand it. So it helps tie in, and then you can go back and see through the entire district that, wow, their conversion percentage is great. Like, why? And then you find out why.
Mhm. I love that. I think you both touched on a lot of things that lead me to additional questions, where you're really focused on the process and training your teams, and Pedro, to your point, um, connecting it for them on a personal level, and finding the things that matter to them. And Norma, I think you spoke to it a little bit, but how do you ensure that that is a culture that perpetuates across your organization, right? We're all gonna um, train in this manner, and we're all going to be bought in this manner. And how do you find time to, Pedro, to your point, make sure that your teams understand kind of the benefits and the value and the why for them across all of your various properties, across all of the different states? And Norm, I know you visited, I think, all 200 plus William Warren properties in your first year with the company, but I don't know how sustainable that is for you. So how are you ensuring that kind of this process is continuing across your teams and you're building this culture in your companies?
I think there's a number of things that happened last March. We have our managers meeting, which is we bring all the property managers in, and we did something a little bit differently this year, where we had 8 different training modules that lasted about 45 minutes each. Every property manager went through the training modules. Every district manager worked with a counterpart, one of their peers, and we mixed it up so that people from California worked with people from Texas and Florida and New York. So that was sort of the foundation of it. The second piece is we have win the day calls, which are typically 3, 4, or depending on it, 5 days a week, where it's a 20-minute call, where the district manager will typically lead the call, but we'll also have a senior property manager lead the call, or potentially someone else lead the call. The different district managers will join those calls. The two divisionals will join those calls periodically. I will listen in myself and join those calls. We have obviously property visits. We have a weekly ops call with our district managers. We'll go around throughout the course of the year and have different district managers speak to their strengths, speak to things that they're doing really well. We bring in every Friday, we bring in different department heads or people to lead presentations. So it's not like it's not something that is just this happens one day. I think culture's ongoing. A lot of the things that we talked about at the beginning about adapting and changing, like we have to tap into people who are brand new into the district manager role, who were successful in other verticals, and they bring different things to the table. So the culture is also not based off of we don't have our district managers ranked in tiers when it comes to bonus. There's a collaboration, so that if I have a good idea or a process or a recipe, as we kind of joked about before, I'm going to share it with Pedro, because he's one of my peers. Like, I want Pedro to be successful. I don't want him to fail or be in tier 4 and not get a bonus this quarter because I knew something that he doesn't. The company's successful and the industry is successful when we share best practices and make it better for our teams. That's why sustaining the culture is easy. Getting over the hurdle of being hesitant to share because I may win and Pedro may not. That's not a culture that you want to be a part of.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think I've always loved that about this industry, is how willing everyone is to share.
That's
Pedro,
true.
anything to add?
Yeah, that's true. And I think that, to piggyback off of what Norm said, we all want our competitors to be better because it elevates all of us. If you're in a market with, let's say, less sophisticated competitors, it's very hard to drive, what brings us value, right? Rates and occupancy in a market where there's less sophistication. So now regarding culture specifically, I feel people have to feel supported and connected, right? The moment you start having silos, you're in trouble. You have to be challenged, but you have to be accountable. If you have all of those, then again, you have that team feeling, you have people enjoying what they're doing today, looking, for more in the future, right? Challenged. And then accountability, right? Because the right people are going to, like Norm said earlier, nobody wants to do things the wrong way, right? And so having those conversations of how people understand that here's the objectives, here's the goals, here's how you get to them, here's the support you have, but you have to meet these, is the part that closes the loop, right? Because we're not giving everybody participation gifts here, right? Like, this is about doing our job and doing it well. Now, I think there is also, when you talk about secret sauce, all of what we're talking about right now is in probably, a lot of the management handbooks, right? We're doing all the right things. Then what comes down to is the quality of the people who are leading, to me. Because you can have somebody who's a high performer, and this happens a lot in sales, where you have a top salesperson who becomes a manager and then is a bad manager
Mhm.
of people.
Mhm.
We were talking about basketball the other day with Norm, and I talked about, Kobe Bryant being probably one of the best players in the history of basketball, probably not a great coach.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so that sort of fabric of a person, if you're looking for a leader that's going to lead people, especially in some of the key divisions, to me, that's the most important part, right?
Mhm.
Especially if you're hiring, because if you hire wrong, then you essentially are contaminating the culture, right?
Mhm.
Because you're going to have a squeaky wheel, somebody who is just about the KPIs, is not listening to the folks, right? Is not seeing sometimes inner office or interpersonal dynamics that are happening that are eroding the culture in
Mhm.
some departments. And so to have that, being able to go there and sniff that out is something that I think comes naturally, right? And I think the key is also to continue to hire to promote whatever your culture is. There's all sorts of cultures, right? There are some that are more, I'm sure in certain industries or in certain divisions, a lot more focused on results. And maybe for those you need to hire, right, somebody who maybe isn't as touchy feely, but can elevate in a different way. So I think every company has to sort of have a moment of what do we want to be,
Mhm.
and then start building from there.
I love that. You said two things that I'd love to dig a little deeper into. First, in terms of making sure that you're hiring good leaders, right? I think we've all been in a scenario where a very high performing individual contributor is not necessarily the best leader, to your point. What do you look for in leaders, whether that's from within your company or from without your company?
Oh, I'm letting Pedro go first.
Accurate.
Well, again, I do feel like you do have to fall back on a process, right? Your HR department needs to understand what you're looking for. Um, if you're a smaller business and it's really up to you, then I would recommend that you essentially write down what the ideal person looks like, right? And try to distill from that those really specific key traits that you think they need to have. Now, for me personally, I hire for attitude because I think we can teach pretty much anything to anyone for the most part within reason. But if you have the right attitude, then you've got the person who's going to be self-motivated, they're going to be open, they're going to be coachable, and they're going to have self-awareness. So when you drop them into the ecosystem, they're going to look around, they're going to sort of feel themselves, uh, you know, slowly getting into the mix. And the reality is, you can tell within a couple of weeks if you hire someone and, you know, they either don't volunteer to go sort of mix it up with coworkers, or if they're asked, they say no, and they kind of stay in their little bubble. And again, for some divisions, you may find that somebody in accounting, an AP person, may be able to just put their headphones on and, crush bills all day, and you don't need them to be, anything but that. Yeah, but then that also would spread if you only went for that, right? So again, I think attitude, I think self-awareness are two of the key things that you would look for when hiring. I do recommend using some of the systems out there that give you sort of general profiles, be it Clifton Strengths, Predictive Index, and I have a friend who works for Stryker, and they only hire through Clifton Strengths Gallup, right?
Hmm.
So if they have a vacancy in the company, they know what type of person they want, and that you do the assessment first. And if you don't match, they don't even interview you,
Mhm.
right? Now,
Mhm.
Stryker is a very big company. But I think there's utilization of that if you're growing and you're scaling, because it gives you a baseline, and you're not interviewing people and sort of spending time wasting yours and theirs if the core, right, the bone marrow of what they need isn't there.
Mm-hmm. I love that, starting with kind of the general assessment of who you are as a
Right.
person. Yeah. Norm, anything to add?
Yeah, Pedro, you know, when you said attitude, I thought a lot about Temple University and John Chaney, to bring it to a basketball uh, uh, kind of theme, in the sense that, you know, attitude really is important, and the one, I would say, maybe I wouldn't call it a mistake, but I think the one thing that, not only I think in self-storage, but in other industries, you know, one of the greatest challenges we have is the acceptance of mediocrity, right? Like I've been doing this 15 years or 18 years or 22 years or 29 years. And it's like, okay, that doesn't mean you're good. It just means you've hung around. And you know, you really want to make sure that you have a hiring process, to your point, where your HR person, that initial point of contact, is really understands what your needs are and the type of culture that you actually do have, and what the standards and expectations are for the people that you know you intend to hire. And then it's not just a question of hiring the first person who replied, or putting, you know, to your point, putting people into a silo where one person interviewed, and then you hired that person. And then I have a couple of people that work for me that historically were told who their new DM was, and they had never met them. So, you know, we go through a pretty simple process of, you know, Pedro's going to interview this person, Kimberly's going to interview this person, and I, you know, I try to be that for the operations team, be that person who interviews after two people interview that person, and I try not to have a conversation I'm not going to have a conversation with Pedro after the interview and say, "What do you think?" I want to hear what Kimberly's going to say after she interviews that person. And then, you know, once you sort of also understand the interview skills of the people who are doing the hiring, or the feedback from the district or divisional managers, because the challenge is putting good people in place, or good people that want to learn. Doesn't matter if they know nothing about self-storage. You can teach anything to someone who's passionate, right? To Pedro's point, it's 100% correct. The question is, did you find somebody who wants to work? Doesn't matter if they don't know how to work. You can teach them how, and what the standards are. But if you're not going to find people who have a strong attitude, or have a desire or willingness to learn, or curious about doing something different, and you know, we want to have growth within you know, our organization, whether it's, you know, from an assistant manager to a property manager. We have one district manager who has extremely low turnover, phenomenal, you know, KPIs, great people, and he doesn't hire property managers. He hires people to come in as assistant managers, and brings them along, and coaches and counsels them, and within the peer group. And then when they're ready to take over a property, they ultimately, that's where they move up to. And he has a great team of property managers. And I think that, and then you have, you know, senior property manager positions and other things that people do to ensure their success. It goes back to, people really don't want to fail. And it's our responsibility to help them and guide them to their success, and understanding, who they are. Kind of goes back to that second question, like, what did you do before this?
Mm-hmm.
And you can tie in the training or something that they did previously. We had a property manager who really struggled offering insurance. Right, we offer insurance to customers. We don't sell.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we offer it. And his job that he did previously was he detailed cars. He detailed cars for high net worth individuals where they might have paid him $4,000 to $10,000 to detail a car. And listening to him, how passionate he was about detailing his car or his business side gig, and I'm like, I'm ready to drive my car to have you detail it for me. Like, I can't afford that, but the fact that, like, you're that passionate about it, it's like, take that passion and turn that into your conversion percentage and your ARs and offering insurance. And he's an extremely successful property manager. And other verticals that we hire within the industry, some new marketing teammates have already spent days at properties and days with our district managers, because the collaboration happens when people understand what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. I love the leaning into what people are passionate about and making sure that you find that and then empower them to really lean in. You said something at the beginning, and I know you've talked about this in some of our conversations around mediocrity, right? And if you can, I think you've said to me, if you can help one person be better today than they were yesterday, then you've met your goal. You've accomplished what you set out to do. Pedro, you also talked about holding people accountable. How do you, within your teams, do that in a way that is inspiring and is something that motivates that person to be better without kind of killing their morale? I think it's maybe the unsexy part of leadership is holding people accountable. But what is your approach to that and to helping people overcome kind of that idea of mediocrity?
Well, I think to get to talking about this, we have to have then culture right back up front and center.
Mhm.
All the basic things that anybody's going to tell you, right, of having clear expectations up front.
Mhm.
So again, like anything that Norm and I have been talking about, if you don't start it well, if it's not well at inception, you then have a rotten process, and then you're just putting either band-aids on it or it's just going to fall on its face.
Mhm.
So clear expectations in the beginning are going to help accountability in the end, right? Now, the little ins and outs of that is, I always say, paraphrase. Did you understand what I was saying? Did I understand what you were saying? I like memorializing, right? Notes and minutes after meetings are very important. Now, once it's going, right, the project's moving, you need check-ins. Norm talked about that as well, right?
Mhm.
It's periodic check-ins. If this is a year-long project, probably monthly check-ins are okay. If this is a month-long project, then you definitely need to be checking in weekly. And if in that timeline you're identifying issues, then the important thing is identifying and addressing the behavior that causes the issue, not the identities, right?
Mhm.
So respectful clarity. Again, why is this challenging? Because we're all running around, or, I don't run around with my hair on fire, but that's because I don't have any. But in general, we're all running around very busy and we've got a million things on our mind. And so you do a check-in with someone, they're behind on their timeline. You kind of get the feeling that they're dragging their feet, or that there's something there that they're not telling you, right? Because it's very easy if you've missed the timeline and it's because Norm didn't get me the reports, Well, that's very specific,
Mhm.
right? But if it's kind of murky, well, then there's something behind that. And what we could potentially do in that time is say, well, you got to get it on time, and just sort of bring up the fact that you're behind, and that's it. So the deficiency, versus saying, okay, let's stop right here. What's going on? Well, now I find out that in reality, it's not just that Norm didn't give you the reports. You don't get along with Norm.
Mhm.
And you had something going on, and Norm didn't, say good morning to you, and then you took that poorly, and then in the meeting he said something that you thought was personal. And by the way, this happens way more than you would think. And as the company gets bigger and bigger, it's worse and worse, right? Because not everybody's going to get along with each other. And so that's just one of the examples of, you kind of have to get in there and say, okay, we've got to fix this, because otherwise you still have to work with Norm. Norm's here and so are you. And so we have to get through this. But again, that takes time, and that's the qualitative side of things. It's not always available, right? Because we talk, on this call about the ideal world,
Mhm.
but we don't live in the ideal world. And so then it's just a matter of judgment. Are you going to make time, right? Put some other things aside and make time to solve that, to save that project, right? And so I think accountability has to be respectful clarity. You have to take the time to talk about it, and you need to really understand what is causing a delay. In the perfect world, you set the objectives, you have the timeline, it all happens, people deliver, you pop your champagne, confetti, it's all great.
Mhm.
But that's not how it works, right? And if you have a construction going on, the GC is going to deliver 10, 20, 30% above budget and out of time. It just somewhat, it's a magical number, but they never really deliver on time, right? And so,
Mhm.
um, you know, again, it's about the quality and about taking time to be with people and understanding what's really going on,
Mhm.
rather than what they
Yeah,
may be saying.
I would. The only thing I could add to that is, when you have those interactions, there's this eagerness to say what you want to say, and your own inability to listen with your ears when other people are talking, and you're having that conversation, and listening to what it is that they're saying to you without trying to get your point across on why are you late, and being a better listener. um, I think it really helps that communication process, because more often than not, you're not listening. And if you're not listening, then you're not really able to help that person, or you're not asking the right questions to get them to share with you that we're not seeing eye to eye on a project, or we picked the wrong, or I've never worked with this person before, or they're in a different time zone, and I don't know how this isn't working. Like the standards and expectations are, for the most part, very similar, right? But if people don't know what they are, you're not going to be able to help them, be on time, uh, in providing them the resources to be successful.
Mhm.
Absolutely. The listening to understand, not listening to respond, is, one of the seven strengths of highly effective people.
Mhm.
And it's one of those that, we should all practice all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I love that. And I feel like positive or negative, you guys keep going back to understanding the why, right? If something's performing well, reverse engineer and figure out why. If something's breaking down, reverse engineer and figure out the why. So love that. Definitely think
And I
that listening
think,
is
and I think
important.
you have to, Pedro, I don't know if, like, I've always found that, you're when at the district manager level, or any level, your experienced person that you work with, they're not going to call you to say that I think I have a roof leak, or my keypad's not working. They're going to solve the challenges that they have in front of them. But when that veteran or really experienced district manager picks up the phone to call you, they need your time and they need your assistance, because they're not going to call you with the simple things. And the flip side of that is, as I think you kind of alluded to earlier, is when you don't hear from new district managers or people that you should have more questions for me. Like, it's not possible that you figured this out in a day or a week or a month. As good as the training may have been, what we do is changes from day to day, and it's too dynamic. It's impossible that you don't have a question or you're not, so there's silence is not always a great thing,
Mm-hmm.
depending upon, where it's coming from.
I agree.
Looking for those cues, super important. Awesome. So you both talked a lot about communication, and I feel like that's kind of been a common thread, is making sure that you've got crystal clear communication, you're communicating consistently. We obviously have a little bit different relationship than you do with your staff, right? So I'm curious, as you're talking about building strong relationships and within your company, when you look externally and you're building relationships with partners, what is something that you wish partners or vendors in your space understood? What's something you wish you could communicate to those of us on the other side of the line that don't live in the day-to-day of operations?
All right, I'll go first. I think that whether it is a vendor that, like OpenTech, or which is something that is a sort of a product and services that are, necessary for us to run our business, right? Like the gate, there's two things that every customer shares are gates and elevators. Right? And if they're not working, it's a bad day, right? And I think that whether it's, regardless of what the goods or services are, I think that, I hate to bring it back to communication, but it's just because you installed a roof, did you follow up? We spent X number of dollars to get something fixed. Are there pictures of the work being completed? Did we know the work was being completed? Did you get the necessary permits? Are you communicating with our CapEx team, our district managers? Are we aware of a product or service that's new? Are there things that we want to test that you provide us the opportunity to? Whether it's third party, third party kind of goes both ways, because I think that there's a responsibility for the operator to have that communication with the investor capital partner, and there's also the capital partner or third party investor who may or may not pick up the phone. So I think from a vendor perspective, I think there really needs to be an understanding of what it is that you provide, following up to make sure that we are getting what we need. Silence is not a good thing, in my opinion, when you have vendors who, like they've told you what they're going to do, and they don't kind of follow through and either have a product that is out of beta testing. And it's one thing if Pedro and I commit to, like, hey, we want to test this new product or service that you have. We understand it's a test, but when we roll something out system wide, it needs to work. The gate has to work. It's non-negotiable. The keypad has to work. And I think one of the things that I enjoy about working with OpenTech is the phone is answered, the emails are responded to, the interaction and the follow up it really makes a difference. So I mean, I cut my teeth in self-storage initially in property services, which was, or facilities, whatever it was called, almost 30 years ago. And so the ability to put units online and keep units online and not have customer issues is really the key to the success. We can't rent units that are in unrentable status. And while OpenTech really isn't in that, you're not fixing roofs for us, but if the gates aren't working, people will become frustrated, and they will, we help them choose to shorten their length of stay when the common denominators aren't working. And I think that, vendors also need to be able to, just follow through. And we have some great vendors out there, and they'll send you comprehensive pictures of work that's completed. It's a pretty simple thing to do that is for whatever reason, not everybody does it.
Mm-hmm. Really does go back to communication, though, to your point.
Yeah, I agree. I'd say if I could, first of all, I want to call them business partners. I think we're, 20 years ago, you called them a vendor. I feel like now they are business partners. They're a part of how you do business. Mm-hmm. And 3 things that I would say is very important: transparency up front. Mm-hmm. Without that, again, from inception, we're not starting from a good place. Communication through the process, and I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by this. And then last is shared accountability, because once it's installed, and like Norm said, the finger pointing doesn't help and doesn't create the feeling that we are a business partner, then that's where you start becoming the vendor. Mm-hmm. Where here's the solution, I sent it to you, you paid me, we're done. Mm-hmm. Right? So transparency, communication, and shared accountability, especially once it's installed, making sure that it's working, following up. And when it comes to communication, something that we talk about this at Trojan as part of our culture is, mm-hmm. we don't do tag your it communication. Mm-hmm. If you do tag your it communication, then again, that's not a partnership. You're not collaborating. You're not working together. So if you guys need to reach us. If I'm not answering the phone, maybe I forgot something. Maybe I'm not there anymore. Maybe I'm on vacation. Find somebody. Like, actually actively want to finish what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think the folks who do that, right, be it somebody in the organization or the organization as a whole, if you perform that way, then you're head and shoulders above everything else. And for a business partner, it's important to understand that operators live in urgency. We have to hurry up to build it. We have to hurry up to fill it up. We have to, hurry up to stabilize it. We have to hurry up to get ahead of the next trend. And so downtime hurts us. Mm-hmm. And more than we can explain, not just, in dollars and cents, but also in morale of the team and in positioning in a market. And then ultimately in trust. So if we don't have the trust from you, it's going to be very hard to build that long term. Mm-hmm.
I love that live in urgency phrase. It's what I'm going to hang on to for a while. Yeah.
I know Norm can, attest to that, I'm sure, but it feels like we're always in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There's always a sense of urgency. Every day is opening day. Like it's a mindset, and if you can't rent that unit today, you're not going to be. It's where our revenue comes from.
So you're losing money, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. You have to have a sense of urgency, and it's I liken it to years ago, previous career, working in flea markets as a young age. There were people who sold furniture, and you never heard them, barking or trying to sell their product. And you had vendors who sold produce, and those produce vendors knew that their green bananas in the morning were going to be probably black at the end of the day. And so if you don't have a sense of urgency, to Pedro's point, that's a challenge.
For sure. I think you really highlighted the need for ownership too, right? From not just your vendor, but your internal teams and everyone that you're working with. So owning that issue. I love that. And I think that's central to a successful relationship. I want to keep us somewhat on time, and I know I've got limited window with you all, so I'd love to shift to a little bit of the future. As you're looking at next year for your operation, what is either one of the biggest challenges or one of the biggest opportunities that you anticipate for yourself as a leader within your companies?
Norm, do you want me to
Pedro's
take this
laughing.
one?
He's laughing. I feel
You
like he's
go.
got an
You
answer.
could start first.
Well, it's just I'm grinning because Norm and I talked a little bit about this, and I'll go back to the baseball analogy and playing small ball. Really, when we're looking at 2026, I think Norm and I share the idea that it's going to be another year where it's going to be playing small ball. Beyond what you can clad your facility with, be it tech, be it fresh paint, be it, a new gate operator, it's really going to be in converting leads, because we feel there may be not as many as some people think there will be. And it's going to be basics, a 2026 where the fundamentals of how we operate are going to drive success for us or not. So operational consistency, sure. Can we make the tech that we have actually make us more efficient? And then just consistency with message, with brand, and with the level of service. I can't go beyond that, because I do think it's going to be an interesting year.
Yeah, it's funny because when we talked about that yesterday, the small ball and when you think about the World Series that just ended, and the things that the teams did to manufacture runs, or to put certain people in a position where, if an opportunity presented itself, you had the right person playing center field, and you had the right person pitching, and you had the right person available, and you knew how to either defense against a bunt or get a small hit and advance the runners and win the game. And Dave Roberts and the Dodgers did that. And it's I think a lot of next year is going to be really focused on in what we alluded to earlier and talked about earlier, which is the performance-based training versus the outcome. And I've always talked about the first three letters in fundamentals is fun. And if our managers understand what the standards are, and you make it enjoyable so that they're feeling good about what they're doing, then there will be more passion to close the reservation, get the conversion. AI is going to be it's the other thing we sort of touched on was what generation are we in storage? The steroid era of self-storage is over. That little blip of the home run derby, and everybody being 98% occupied and incredible rates, is that little era is over. We're all sort of being drug tested now, and the game's different. we're going to have to perform every day. You have to win the day. Kimberly said it earlier. It's like today better than yesterday and tomorrow better than today. And if we're just focused on training our people to be successful, in all likelihood, they'll be successful. The things we can control, the economy, or, what stocks are going up and down, and how AI is going to impact employment, and all those things that we can control, we shouldn't be focused on. The next episode of Landman is not going to be relevant to our manager's ability to rent a space.
Mm-hmm. I have so many additional things I want to dig into with you all, but we'll have to schedule another time to do that. Because you just made me think of like 800 questions. But if you could give one piece of advice to someone who's up and coming in self-storage, maybe up and coming in operations leadership, what would you want them to take away? What's kind of the one thing that you would pass on?
So for me, being shy and introverted, I would say you need to meet 5 people. And every time you go to one of these state association shows, national association shows, you need to meet 5 people, and you need to start making connections, because every time anybody asks, I'm sure myself, Pedro, what do you love most about self-storage? The people.
The people.
That's it. It's the people. So if you're not interacting and learning and creating relationships in this industry, I think you do yourself a disservice, and you're not going to make yourself better by not reaching out to people and creating that dynamic that makes self-storage so amazing.
That's great. And I echo that. I guess for somebody who is entering the business, I would say learn the business from the ground up, no matter what position you're in. And Norm alluded to this earlier. If you're going to work in self-storage, you need to be at the site. You need to understand the customer dynamics and stay close to team realities, right? He talked about, I guess, a show, right? Like, that's not going to help you for sure. What's going to help you is understanding the customer, their needs, and how we're translating that into value for them, and then ultimately for the company. So, this is an industry where everybody should really understand what's happening ground up and keep your pulse on the market. So good luck.
All goes back to those fundamentals.
Right. And I don't know if this will make the recording or not, but I will say, I shot a note out to Robert Cheedy, who obviously we know who Robert is, and I had no expectation that my phone was going to ring. I said, when you have a chance, just give me a call. I've got something I'd like to run by you. And within 30 minutes, he was calling me, and he was traveling somewhere between an airport, and those are incredible things. So I appreciate that.
Mm. Well, I would say the same about both of you. Anytime that we've reached out with questions, or, especially me personally, anytime I'm looking for advice or information, you two are always so quick to make yourselves available and to, share your time with me, very much like today. So I'm, again, so appreciative of you both. And we are absolutely going to have to do this again next time in person. But thank you both so much for spending an hour with me and sharing a little bit more about how you lead your teams and your time in self-storage. I think I found it super valuable. I imagine many people will.
I learned a lot from Pedro. So I know that is, I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to doing it again.
Likewise, Norm, and likewise, Kim, thank you for everything. Look forward to seeing you guys very soon. Take care and be well.
Very, very soon. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.